This research presentation is about content-based instruction for English language learners. I will review the challenges towards this instruction and also provide some solutions. Some of the challenges to content-based instruction include the academic literacy challenge and also the teacher training and best practices for instructing English language learners challenge. Underneath the academic literacy challenge, we have the idea that academic English is not the same as conversational English. There is a different registrar for academic English. Students must be able to read and write in expository structure using formal style and academic language. Even in spoken academic English, there are fewer cues for students, and especially in written academic English, there are no contextual clues to help the student figure out the meaning. When you're reading an academic text, there are no facial expressions or hand gestures or intonation for a student to use to gather information. Additionally, it takes longer for students to acquire academic English, up to 5 to 7 years. We also move into the issue of content area reading and literacy in content area texts. A content area academic test is challenging because the writers of these texts assume that all students coming to the text have the same background knowledge, which is not true for English language learners who have come here with different backgrounds and different understanding, not the same understanding as a student who's gone through the American public education system since kindergarten. Additionally, content area readings are abstract, conceptual, and they include academic vocabulary that is challenging. These words do not always have concrete or visible definitions. The way that these texts are written is with complex sentence structure, with long and involved sentences that contain multiple ideas together. The ideas are densely packed and not separated out for students. A sentence could be long and convoluted and confusing for an English language learner. Additionally, the ideas expressed and the relationships between these ideas in content texts are difficult relationships. They are not always direct cause and effect relationships or main idea and detail relationships, so it's harder for an English language learner to decipher. The second challenge is the teacher training and best practices challenge. This comes and it starts with pre-service teachers. A lot of pre-service teachers are not being trained fully in writing language objectives. A research study found that there were many errors when they looked at over 96 different students and the language objectives they wrote in SciUp lesson plans. These objectives are not feasible either in a single period of instruction. They describe an activity as opposed to a learning goal. They might just be copied from a state standard and not specific to the lesson. They might be vague or too broad in the wording of the objective. Oftentimes, the language objective describes an ELA goal, not an ESL goal. Sometimes, the language objective has no connection to the content objective. And occasionally, the language objective only focuses on vocabulary, instead of moving past vocabulary and thinking about the grammatical structures of language. Oftentimes, pre-service teachers are trained with minimal additional classes in how to service ESL students. And then they are placed in classrooms in a job that has a variety of learners in their classroom, and they have had minimal training in the best practices for this. One way to improve the training is to offer professional development to teachers. An excellent professional development would be in SciUp training. Occasionally, there is a disconnect between the content departments and the language learning department. This comes into play a lot of times at the collegiate level as well, where the language learning departments are not interacting with the content departments, and so classes are not cohesive or aligning with each other. Oftentimes, a teacher might start out committed to using SciUp or sheltered instruction, but it involves a lot of commitment and time and energy, and sometimes teachers get discouraged or they don't see the value in this for the students who are not ESL in their classrooms. And these are some of the challenges for teachers using best practices for English language learners. Some solutions for the academic reading challenge would be for a content area teacher to use content maps and graphic organizers as they are guiding students through reading instruction. So as a history teacher is reading their chapter on the Civil War, they would provide a content map to guide students through that chapter and fill in important ideas that they want the students to focus on as they're reading. Pulling out important ideas also comes when a teacher might ask guided questions or focused reading, so that students aren't bogged down in every single detail, but they know what's important for them to be understanding as they're reading. This could come as a teacher underlines in a photocopied text or points out where the main ideas and significant details are for students. Another solution would be to provide differentiated texts on the same topic. So again, if we have a history teacher instructing about the Civil War, that teacher might find different textbooks at different reading levels. There might be a 3rd grade reading level, a 5th grade reading level, an 8th grade reading level, in a middle school history class. And so there are different texts that still provide the same main ideas of content for these students, but at a reading level that is appropriate for them. And finally, the content area teacher needs to take ownership that they are the expert in reading instruction in their content area. Each content area, math, science, social studies, English, has different functions and structures of grammar and writing and reading. And you read differently as a scientist than you read as a historian, or you read as a literary analyst. And the content area teacher needs to be able to instruct in these reading strategies to help students be successful in that content domain. Here are some sample content maps and graphic organizers that a teacher could use as they are reading. The first concept map you see would illuminate cause and effect relationships in a text. On the right-hand side, you see a falling dominoes text map, which shows causal relationships in a text. And then finally at the bottom you see a sequence change, which shows time order of events. Some solutions for the challenge of lack of teacher training would be to provide professional development in SIOP. One of the research studies found that providing professional development all at once without any additional coaching and training and follow-up really is ineffective. Teachers feel unprepared to use it and that they don't have any support as they're trying to use SIOP in their classrooms. This study found that if teachers were given coaching for 2 years after their initial training, that they were much higher in implementing the SIOP strategies. They were allowed to have a SIOP instructor come and observe them and give them feedback. There were group meetings where they could discuss the strategies they had used, success stories, and ask for help. And as this cohort of teachers worked through the SIOP program with 2 years of coaching, they gained more teachers and more momentum in their building as well to create an environment that supports using SIOP for language learners. When teachers were able to do this, they saw significant growth in student scores, not just on standardized tests from the state, but on English language development tests, in reading, writing, and in their overall scores. Students who had teachers who were receiving ongoing SIOP training, their scores increased significantly over students whose teachers had received SIOP training once with no follow-up. Additionally, pre-service teachers should receive more instruction, modeling, and examples in how to write positive language objectives that are specific, that go beyond just content area vocabulary. And they need more modeling and coaching through how to do this before they become teachers. Additionally, as a content area teacher who is teaching language learners, you should be able to give instruction in reading strategies. In looking at a study developed for literature instruction to English learners, literature teachers can provide the reading strategies necessary for the type of text they are teaching, and also to have their classroom set up as a reader's response focus, where it is not the instructor who contains all of the knowledge and interpretation of the piece, but it is focused on readers being able to use their language to respond and reflect on what they have read. This kind of setup is communicative in the classroom. And it really pushes students to work as a community and a group, and to see that interpretation is not just singular, but that there can be a variety of responses to a text. And when you have a variety of responses, you also push students to be able to defend their responses through looking back at the text, through close reading for evidence, through argumentation to other students, through argumentation in writing. This kind of workshop style might include things like literature circles, journal keeping, peer writing groups, and role plays. It also might involve close readings, and students will form arguments to interact with their other classmates in the text to support their own opinions. This communicative classroom helps build critical thinking about literature, and you can do this through dialogues, scripts that students have written, acting out as characters, putting a student acting as a character in the hot seat for a classroom where other students can ask that character questions and really challenge each other's understanding of a character in a piece of literature. Having a reader-focused or a reader-response-focused classroom in the literature content area allows students to experience different cultures through the literature they read, and it provides them an opportunity to go through the experiences of culture shock and come to a better understanding of cultures that are different from them in a safe environment where they have this learning community to think through these ideas and these thoughts, and also to have a teacher coach them and point out and make them think critically about some of their responses to literature that might not be culturally sensitive. In conclusion, there are a lot of ways to help improve these two challenges: both academic literacy for English language learners and appropriate instruction for teachers who are instructing English language learners. Thank you and have a nice night.